So just over a week ago, we did a video talking about a big new patch that came into the game. It swept unidentified gear as a system throughout all of the expansions and core Tyria. It made some balance changes, it did some other stuff, but mostly it was preparing for the Super Adventure Box release, which meant all the stuff was in-game, but we still had a few days to actually be able to play it. We got the patch notes, but we didn't actually get to see how that stuff manifested, and it seemed pretty cool. It was new adventures coming to SAB, a new vendor, and new upgrades. Well, now that the Super Adventure Box is actually in, as I promised you all, I want to talk about how that stuff ended up going. Starting, I guess, with one of the more boring of the new features. That's the new Super Adventure Box Weekly Trader, now added to Ratasum. So it's a holographic Robin Raccoon guy, and the patch notes described him as updating his wares weekly, which I originally interpreted to mean he'd be like some of the Guildhall traders, or the Karmic Converter, or I guess the Pack Supply Network agents to an extent. And he would be an NPC that each week you go to, and the list of available items would actually change over real-world time. But looking more closely, I see that it's actually phrased as him simply restocking his inventory each week. And so I guess what that means is the items we see he has available now, today, as I speak into the microphone, will be there forever. It's just you can only buy a certain amount every week because the items are too OP to have infinite access to, I guess. And so just look at this as another Bauble Bubble Sync. What they have on offer are transmutation charges. If you don't PvP or World vs. World, maybe you'd like to use this. The fact that transmutation charges still end up on vendor lists in 2019 is crazy to me, and definitely shows there's a lot of players out there who do a lot of fashion wars but don't really play much variant content in the game. But you got transmutation charges, mystic coins, I think people will always be happy to see. Then also chests of legendary shards. So this allows you to actually work on some of the Gen 2 legendaries straight up. And finally, Tyrian exchange vouchers. I really think that Tyrian exchange vouchers are one of the more exciting options here. Before now, they were mostly coming from Blackline chests and Blackline keys. People don't often engage in the side of the game where they farm gold to turn into gems, to turn into keys to get these. But what this means is purely through Super Adventure Box, you can pick up very specific currencies from areas of the game all over. You can bypass dungeons, for example, by getting your dungeon tokens from Super Adventure Box instead. Or you can do stuff in Heart of Thorns metas without actually going there, or do bounties in Path of Fire. It's really handy, and I definitely recommend that you guys do log in and make sure each time that ticks over and they restock to pick up just a couple more, because these things are basically free and they help you in so many different ways. So yeah, that's the vendor. I don't really have too much else to say. Let's move on to some of the more interesting features, starting I guess with adventures. So the footage in the background will probably make you cringe a little bit because it's been 5 whole days since the festival came back, and I'm sure you're all amazing already. But what you're watching are my first very casual attempts at these new adventures, where I don't even know where to go yet, so I'm kind of taking it a little bit easy. But so the patch notes talked about this. Every single zone in SAB now has a new adventure. And some of you guys correctly guessed this before patch in the comments of my last video, so well done to you. What this turns out to basically be is just like the 8 red coins mechanic from Super Mario 64 or the other iterations spinning off from that, where, and I'm pretty sure it's a direct homage and nod back to that. The idea is you find Gordon, the racing Choya. It was Gordon that we saw in the trailer they released before the festival came out. His racing enthusiasm has now infected this festival too, and what it will do is spawn 8, not red coins, blue coins for you to run through the zone collecting. Now, these adventures are only available on normal mode. And ultimately, what I think the devs want you to do is try and get gold on every single map. There's an achievement for getting gold on every single zone, I should say, as you go through. But so what's really fun about this, actually, is I look at it as a normal mode plus kind of mechanic. Obviously, there's already multiple modes that give you different routes and experiences through the same maps. Infantile mode gives you the happy little clouds and rainbows that you wander along and basically don't even experience the content. Normal mode is, you know, a lot longer to complete and is sort of how they originally envisioned it. There's quite open world roaming elements to it, it feels like. Tribulation mode takes you on these really bizarre back paths and crazy tight corridors and really weird waffly directions. Well, now, if you do these races, it's kind of like a middle ground between Trib and normal mode. And I don't mean in terms of difficulty. Trib is still leagues ahead if you're playing Tribulation mode without guides and stuff. That's a whole different kettle of fish. But it's like normal mode plus. You'll run through maps that you already know in the same direction. I speculated before this release that maybe this adventure would encourage you to go in reverse directions through the map, and that could be fun. But no, you still go from the start to the end, but because of where the coins are placed, you'll find you go off on little tangents that you wouldn't normally do in Infantile, Normal, or Tribulation, but now you're doing them because there's a coin there. And it's kind of like just a fourth route through the map. Nothing too crazy, but it's more than I was expecting. I always forget how open the Super Adventure Box worlds are and how much the devs can play with that stuff. So if you just watch the footage in the background, you'll see, oh, look, WP's going up the inside of this hollow log that normally we'd run past on any other mode, but if you're doing the races, then you're probably going for it. The races do seem to have been a big success. Lots of people are doing really well at them, like unbelievably, mind-bogglingly well. And I think community's kind of sprouting up talking about how to go further with it. It's really interesting for me to actually play because in many ways, I would say the community already played Super Adventure Box like this. We already challenged ourselves to speedruns. We already put YouTube videos up showing, the absolute quickest times we could get through. I myself, I think the very first time the festival came out, maybe it wasn't Back to School, the second release, but way back early, I remember I did a video competition myself challenging people to speedrun World 1 Zone 1. And, I tried my best, I got my time, and then I put it out there to community. My time and all of the times that I gathered in my competition have since been dwarfed because people got so good at this. And now ArenaNet kind of offer this first-party version of it. It's not exactly the same as the old speedruns the community got off their own backs and did for themselves because, again, you're going for the coins, and the coins take you on slightly more divergent paths. I think they've been pretty intelligent about it. And so to talk about the difficulty as well, the gold rewards are definitely not freebies. They seem to be very similarly tuned to how the roller beetle races went at the closing of last year and early this year, in that you can get bronze and silver reasonably quickly. But gold is like a real thing to go for. Some of those roller beetle races were really challenging on gold. You had the very short technical race in Snowdon where gold was, you had to be very, very precise, and then you kind of had the really long course in Brisbane where gold was also difficult but over a very long period of time. Well, the Super Adventure Box stuff seems to be tuned to the same. World 1 Zone 1, you might think, oh, that race is really easy. But from my estimation, it's really, really tricky and tight. You've got to do everything perfectly in order. I think they're operating on that same philosophy where the longer the zone is, the less tight the timing is for gold, so you've got a little bit more leeway to mess up just because you've got such a long adventure to go through. But the shorter the zone is, the tighter the timing is for gold. So it's not a freebie when you go into there, and I certainly didn't get gold on my first playthroughs, which you can see the footage of in the background, for better or worse as it may be. I am honestly disappointed that they never expanded the zones in interesting little ways, though that does happen for the other feature we'll talk about in a second. And I do also think that they missed a trick when it comes to maybe going in reverse directions through the courses, but this wasn't lazily implemented. It seems to have had a lot of thought, and it offers a new thing as well, which means while you're doing the adventure, you can reset it and teleport yourself back to the start of the map. Kind of a curious thing. I did try to test, last of all, whether you can walk through the map killing all the enemies first, then return to the start and do the adventure with no enemies that will potentially impede your progress, and it somewhat seemed to work. As in, enemies don't respawn when you start the adventure. I wonder if that's an oversight from the devs, because it's definitely not in line with the drop-in, drop-out philosophies of the adventure system in the game as a whole. So I wonder what you guys think about that, or if I'm maybe looking too closely at something that's not relevant. Alright, let's move on. So the other thing are the new upgrades. This is on paper, I think, the much more exciting addition to the Super Adventure Box. Basically, we can now get a Boomerang, and we can get a Mega Bomb. The bombs in the past were the mini bombs you could either place or throw. Well, now we've got Mega. These are not being given to us in a World 3 as potentially there might have once been thought to have been. So how do we get them? Well, achievements. There are 2 new achievement quest chains that if you browse to the festival section of your hero panel in-game, you'll see have been newly added. There's Super Adventurers Quest 1, which is all around World 1, and then there's Super Adventurers Quest 2, which is all about World 2. Basically, you visit a selection of already known secret landmarks littered around the worlds, with the in-game UI giving you tips on how to get there. So, for an example, one of your objectives might be to go to that little poison lake that you throw the bomb in, it drains out, and you go to, like, the secret shop that was down there. Where you're going to be visiting locations like this. You have to do them in order, and once you've visited them all, you get the upgrades. So, Quest 1 has you getting items like the secret key and the majestic crown, the auspicious hat. Quest 2 is about World 2 and has you like collecting various food items, it seems. The legendary cheese, the fabled drumstick, the epic apple, and so on. So, once you get all of the items, what it kind of does is it gives you access to a chest you can interact with and get the upgrade. So, let's talk about the first one, the Mega Bomb. Basically, it's a bomb that just does a ton of damage. I think the normal damage is 50. And if I'm reading this right on Wiki, this thing does 100, so it's twice as strong. And you might think, oh, is that really that relevant? I mean, Super Adventure Box isn't too much about the combat, but there are a lot of time gates in Super Adventure Box, namely around breaking the cages, or the stumps, or the honeycombs, or just straight up fighting the bosses. And for these, which by the way are excluded from the new adventure system, you don't have to try and break the cage to finish the adventure races. The devs deliberately put the endpoints before that, which I think was a nice touch. But if you think about playing Super Adventure Books, you're doing it for the dailies and whatnot. These can be kind of annoying to just sit there swinging away at them. So, wow, we get the new Mega Bomb and it can blow them up much quicker, right? Twice as fast. That's fantastic. Except, hold on. And especially if you think about like the King Toad with his burn phases and so on. So that sounds good, but hold on. They made it so that it doesn't actually do extra damage to honeycombs and stumps and bosses. Maybe the wizard at the end of the third zone of World 2 takes extra damage. Maybe the Yeti takes extra damage. But as far as I'm reading on Wiki in these early days, it seems the best thing to do is still just throw mini bombs in those scenarios because you don't get the extra damage anyway. So what do you guys think? Is this a bug? Is there a dev comment about this? Or is it to deliberately not mess with the timing of those sequences? Perhaps because of the way Super Adventure Box is coded, or they just really believe that those moments in our adventures are the right amount of time to complete and they were never meant to be accelerated too much, even with new upgrades. Because presumably, had World 3 come in and World 4 come in, we would have got these upgrades anyway, or upgrades like this, that would have sped up the earlier things. Is that off the table now for some reason? So, yeah. There's another bug as well. So this is a bit iffy. Super Adventure Box progression is character bound. As in, if I play on my main, I get all the upgrades, then I make a new character 3 years later and go into Super Adventure Box. I'm back to nothing. I don't have my new heart containers, I don't have anything, and I'm, you know, my baubles and so on, I'm off to go on the adventure again. Now, I'm a player that very much thoroughly appreciates that. It's because of that I was able to do the lovely Super Adventure Box Let's Play I'm doing right now without having to buy a new account, and at a whim at any point I can go and have that fresh experience without being tarnished by having all the upgrades, even though I've forgotten about the content itself because, you know, it's been years and years and years since I did it, for example. So I think that's a powerful, important thing. I'd like to see that in as many places as possible with Guild Wars as a game in general. But as we know, the game doesn't really work that way in general now. Most things you get are account bound and forever. Particularly, achievements are account bound and forever. And getting access to these upgrades is an achievement. Which, theoretically, if the devs didn't do this right, could have meant you would get the upgrade on one character on your account, the first one to do it. And then, if you delete that character, you'd lose the upgrade, create a new one, but you can't do the achievement again, so you've lost it forever. It's a kind of a weird idea that maybe these upgrades could be on one of your tunes and that's it, dead forever. The devs did anticipate this, though, and they tried to fix it by adding an interactable chest that unlocks all subsequent characters can visit once the achievement is done to claim their upgrade. So, for example, the Super Adventurers Quest 2 in World 2 ends with a vending machine, and once you've done it, you can just go to that vending machine on any of your characters and pick up the Boomerang, right? Which kind of means you get that as a freebie now and does change things a bit. But, so that works fine. However, for the Mega Bomb, the chest you get it from seems to be broken, which means that entire string of things I just said that are bad is kind of true in the game right now. You can only have the bomb on one character. Maybe it'll be patched out by the time this video goes up, and I certainly hope so, but yeah, it seems a little bit iffy there. To speak lastly about the Boomerang itself, what is it? Well, an upgrade for the whip. I think I guessed that it might have been an upgrade for the slingshot in my previous video. It's actually whip. I probably should have guessed that correctly since the whip was the stunner. And basically the idea is you can toggle between them. You can choose when you get the Mega Bomb upgrade whether you want to continue using the mini bombs, and the same here, you can choose which one you want to use. And yeah, it's just basically a ranged stun device that goes out away from you, comes back in. It's a nice little addition to your arsenal. Could be useful in various places. The other big thing with the update is something most players ignore, but genuinely might be my favorite thing. It's decorations, obviously. So let's talk a bit about these, and if you're alt-tabbed, please look back at the footage right now. These things are insane. We all know that the devs have been making bigger and bigger decorations recently. In the announcement for the patch, they did say, or in the notes, it said it was going to be snowy themed stuff, so we were looking at the World 2 Zone 3 style assets. Well, what do they add? Some really immense stuff. First of all, there's like a snowy version of the Super Adventure platform. It's exactly the same in every way, except now it's white, so you can do different things in terms of the colors. But then they added cliff faces, and you'll think, all right, so snowy wall, snowy face, that's not going to be anything too crazy, is it? Look at the size of these decorations. I just got in game, crafted at least one of each up, threw them through the assembler for you guys, and here's how they come out. Nuts. How this combines with some of the roller beetle racing tracks that they've added recently, jumping puzzle concepts other people have, because ultimately they are Super Adventure assets, and Super Adventure assets are very conducive to jumping around on. I haven't given enough thought just yet, but creatively minded people are going to be able to do some really fun things here. I kind of want to build a giant floating castle, not going to lie, built out of these blocks, because they're just so big and badass. Look at them. Wow. So that's most of the updates. That's how it ended up going. I hope you've enjoyed the footage. Now, I will be finishing my Super Adventure playthrough, which was mostly recorded in 2018, with an additional episode for 2019, going through the whole motions of this. I encourage you guys to check that out when the last episode comes out in about a week or so, I guess. But there are a couple of other little changes as well. I may as well mention. There's a new chair, obviously. The Super Adventure chair, and in one of my videos this week, you saw there were like hundreds of people sitting them in Ratasum. And outside of SAB, that wasn't originally included with the patch notes, there were some tweaks to the corner meta, I think in a subsequent update. I know we don't often think about this meta, and it wasn't what we all hoped it would be in the end at Gandara, the Moon Fortress, but there's been a slight change, which means now to get into those treasure rooms at the end of that meta event, you actually have to participate in the events themselves. You can't just come along afterwards with a key card and go on in. Why that was needed to happen, I'm not entirely sure. Lastly, to round the video out, completely outside of the game, there was a little post on the forums just as I'm recording this. I thought I'd mention it. It's about raiding. So it's a post, I think it was from Byron Miller, who says, "Hey folks, with the next raid release, I've made a change that will move raid rewards out of the boss statue world chest and into a bouncy chest that will be delivered when a boss encounter is successfully completed. This is to ensure that people who disconnect or otherwise leave an instance without interacting with said chest will still receive their rewards. The chests themselves will still appear, and there will still be some loot in them in the form of unidentified gear, but all the rewards you'd normally expect to see in that chest have been relocated to the bouncy chest." So yeah, this is a bit of convenience and quality of life. The funny thing is, even when raids were first being implemented in those early Heart of Thorns days, I think the devs knew about this, but they made the compromise anyway, I think, because they really liked the idea of seeing the big chest there that you walk over to, press F on, you see the animation as it opens, and they're trying to tie, you know, that to being a big moment, rather than the little bouncy chests that were kind of boring at that point, and people had been getting spammed with anyway. You can look at the way dungeons were developed for a similar story. So they did that with raids, they made that compromise, and now with the unidentified gear going global, I guess this means that they can have their cake and eat it too now. You will still be able to see the animation of the chest, and it will have use, but the really important loot will get beamed straight into you, and undoubtedly people will be very happy with that. Well, there you go, guys. That's my, as promised, Super Adventure Books video update, documenting exactly how these changes ended up looking once they were in game. Let me know in the comments if I missed anything, and especially anything really important. I'll keep you up to date in a future one, and until next time, guys, take it easy. I'll see you soon.